As Mexico's presidential race enters its final weeks, can anyone stop Enrique Pena Nieto being elected president? You're watching Inside Story Americas from Washington. Hello, I'm Shihab Ratansi. For months, Enrique Pena Nieto has enjoyed a commanding lead in the polls. He's benefited from widespread discontent over the way President Felipe Calderon's PAN party has governed Mexico. Their candidate, Josefina Vazquez Mota, is floundering in the polls. But thousands took to the streets on Sunday in protests against Pena Nieto, organized by the student-led I Am 132 movement. They oppose a return to power of his institutional revolutionary party, whose 71-year rule of the country up until 2000 was marred by corruption and authoritarianism. Pena Nieto has also been damaged by allegations that the country's main broadcaster, Televisa, had colluded with his party to favor his candidacy. It's the candidate of the left, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who narrowly lost out to Felipe Calderón in 2006, who could benefit from any backlash against Pena Nieto. In recent weeks, he's been gaining in the polls. Whoever wins this election will have to grapple with a country ravaged by drug violence and poverty. The candidates clashed in Sunday's final presidential debate, though no one managed to land a knockout blow. So, where do the parties stand following that debate? Al Jazeera's Rachel Levin is in Mexico City.
In 3 weeks, Mexicans will go to the polls to pick their next president, and on Sunday, millions tuned in to watch the second presidential debate. Now, most were hoping to see that this debate would be contentious and that sparks would fly between the candidates, but it proved to be rather flat. As we can see in the headlines today in most of the major newspapers, they're saying that ruling party candidate Josefina Vazquez Mota was who came out swinging. She attacked the leading candidate, Enrique Pena Nieto, viciously. At one point, she showed a photo of Enrique Pena Nieto when he visited a private university earlier this month and was greeted by student protesters. She said, quote, "We don't want someone who is going to hide in the bathroom of a university to resolve the country's problems." In recent weeks, the ruling party candidate has taken a hit in the polls, losing ground to leftist candidate Andrés Manuel López Obrador, representing the Democratic Revolutionary Party. López Obrador, who narrowly lost the race in 2006, told voters that he represents a real political change. His poll numbers have increased over the last month, thanks to the student movement that is highly critical of Pena Nieto and the return of the PRI, which ruled Mexico for 70 years. The students organized marches throughout the country on Sunday, hours before the debate, and gathered in the Zócalo to watch the debate on jumbo screens. The two main topics that dominated the debate were ways to fight corruption and improve the economy. But what was once again glaringly absent were concrete proposals from the candidates to fight the drug violence, which has claimed more than 50,000 lives in the past 5 years. Sunday was the last official presidential debate. However, the students are calling for a third one that they themselves would moderate. However, leading candidate Enrique Pena Nieto is so far refusing to take part. Considering his strong lead in the polls even after Sunday's performance, he just might feel that he doesn't have to participate.
So, who is going to prevail on July the 1st? To discuss this, we're joined from Mexico City by Maria Jose Lopez, who is a spokesperson for the Yo Soy, or I Am 132 student movement. In the studio is Eric Olson, a senior associate at the Mexico Institute at the Woodrow Wilson Center, and Francisco Gonzalez, who is professor of Latin American Studies at Johns Hopkins University. Maria Jose Lopez, it was one of the demands of the Yo Soy 132 movement to have a televised debate. Was it worth it?
Well, I think it was. I think it was one of the most anticipated debates in the whole Mexican history. Thousands of people reunited at the Zócalo, the center of Mexico City, to watch it, which is unprecedented. We hadn't had such a widespread political interest amongst the citizens, and I think it was absolutely worth it.
How did they do? Which candidate did well, do you think? Which candidate didn't do well?
Well, I think in in relation to the past debate, all four of them raised their game. I think it was marked the spike of López Obrador. I mean, he did very badly on the first one. I think he proposed things on this second debate. Josefina Vazquez Mota was highlighted because she came out with claws to attack every other candidate. She, in fact, did 37 direct attacks. Quadri, well, he has like 2%, between 2 and 3% acceptance in polls, so he basically moderated the debate. And I think Pena Nieto is the one who did worst. He stuttered a lot. He seemed to only know his points by heart and not by understanding. So I think I wouldn't proclaim a winner, but I would proclaim a loser, I think, and it would be him only on the way he worked the debate.
All right, well, Eric, also, very quickly though, we should actually mention there are 4 candidates, actually. Gabriel Quadri is that 4th candidate of the new alliance. I mean, is he having any impact? What does he stand for?
Well, he had.
No, I'm just asking Eric, Maria. We'll come back to you in a minute.
He's, as Maria said, has only 2% in the polls or less. He's been undermined by his connection of his party to the union boss, the head of the teachers' union. He's a bright man, an academic, has a lot of good ideas, a very vibrant speaker, but he's been undermined by this connection to the union and highly corrupt and not very widely accepted union. So
the teachers' union is probably another inside story, Americas, I suppose, that we could go into. Professor, then, did you agree then with Maria Jose Lopez's assessment of the debate?
I'd start by asking debate, what debate? There was no debate. The format, the rigidity of the format means that what we saw was 4 candidates, on the one hand, talking, just through talking points, and a secondary tactic, which was much more effective, which centered on the idea of character, questioning character's integrity. And there, of course, candidates like Enrique Pena Nieto, with a past history, very active in politics as governor of Estado de Mexico, certainly his record, there are many things that can be brought up. And so, particularly Josefina Vazquez Mota of the PAN trying to make a very unlikely a comeback, but still in the race. This is an open race. Went for it, hoping to strike a knockout blow. That didn't happen, but my sense is that between now and the end line, between now and July the 1st, the issues regarding character and character integrity are going to play a larger and larger role. And there, of course, Enrique Pena Nieto, Andrés Manuel López Obrador have a very contentious past. Josefina Vazquez Mota, for example, made a very scathing allegation. López Obrador joined the PRI in 1971, the year when a second series of assassinations ordered by the regime took place. And Peña Nieto, at the end of the day, many think is basically just being put forward by the oligarchy, Televisa and the monopolies.
Well, let's take a look at the polls quickly. It is very difficult to interpret them sometimes, but here are some of the most recent polls from Mexico. One conducted by the newspaper Reforma put support for Peña Nieto at 29%, with López Obrador at 26%, with Vazquez Mota trailing on 18%. That poll gives Peña Nieto a slim 3% lead within the margin of error, I believe. A month ago, Peña Nieto led López Obrador by 11%. But another recent poll gave Peña Nieto a commanding 12-point lead. Peña Nieto was on 33%, López Obrador 21%, Vazquez Mota 20%. Maria Jose Lopez, how should we interpret these polls? Because I think part of your critique of the coverage of this election is that the polls are being used as well to create a sense of inevitability for Peña Nieto. So what should we make of this?
Well, there are dozens of polls in Mexico, and frankly, I'm a communication student. I don't know very much about statistics, but I think, well, the lead polls, for example, Milenio Geaiza, have not been coming from how do you say it? Have not been coming from a media that's credible, that's
impartial,
ethical. So, exactly, impartial. So, I wouldn't know what to make of those polls. I think Peña Nieto has the lead. I don't believe the made up, or I haven't seen the proof that López Obrador has a lead, but I am not sure, and that's why we're demanding as a movement information, impartial information. I do not really know. I have no information to assess how are the polls doing or how the candidates are doing.
So, Professor, what's your sense? And has AMLO had some sort of surge forward? What can we make of these statistics?
My sense is that the majority of people, like Maria, have a sense of uncertainty. There's a high percentage of distrust. The system is not trusted. And currently, pollsters in Mexico are undergoing an existential crisis. Things looked almost like a foregone conclusion up until a couple of months ago. Then Peña had two very, very bad months. May and June have not been good for him, whereas they've been quite good for López Obrador with the approach of moving toward the center, embracing moderate values. That's been very good for him. So the momentum clearly is, or has been at least until now, Peña down, sell Peña, buy AMLO. How close are they? Most of the polls currently still give Peña ahead between 4 and 9, 10 points. But there are a couple of really reputable pollsters who've come out with results that in fact look lopsided. And so suddenly, these things coming from creditable sources have made everyone really start having doubts.
And of course we have this other major factor now of the student movement, of which Maria Jose Lopez is a member. And so perhaps we should give some background on that. The Yo Soy 132 or I Am 132 movement is only about a month old, perhaps actually to the day. It began as a protest by students at the Ibero-American University in Mexico City against Enrique Pena Nieto, who was visiting the campus. Some PRI politicians and media outlets alleged that the protesters were not students but had been smuggled in by opposing political parties. And in response, 131 students posted a video on YouTube showing their student IDs. The slogan, Yo Soy 132, or I'm the 132nd student, went viral and has become a rallying cry for protesters. Eric Olson, I mean, is it coincidental that much of the questioning then about the polls, for example, or the inevitability in the media about Peña Nieto, and indeed perhaps the rise of AMLO, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, is kind of coinciding with some of this, you think, the student movement?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it. What had been given almost that Peña Nieto was going to win this election, almost for months, even years, suddenly seems like the inevitability of his election is not so clear. And without a doubt, the role of the students has played it's been an important factor. Why? Because it's been spontaneous, it's not been controlled by other parties, it's viewed as an expression of general public sentiment against a machine, a conglomerate of news media that are kind of dictating. They're pushing back, and I think that's tapped into broadly felt sentiment in the Mexican public.
Well, we have then one of the 131 then, the original 131, Maria Jose Lopez, with us. So perhaps you can explain to us then, what do you stand for? What are you trying to achieve?
Well, we are trying to achieve lots of things. I mean, first of all, it was against the biased media coverage. It was a stand that we took on our video and that people made their own when we said we're not going to let media outlets, we're not going to let members of political parties such as the PRI lie openly to us. I mean, we know they have been lying on some extent, but to lie to us in our face, that to say to us they are not students, and when we have like the student IDs to prove it, that's when we come out to prove it. Right now, the 132 movement and the Más de 131, more than 131, that's like the Ibero portion of the 132 movement, have come out against the campaign that Peña Nieto has been leading, against what he stands for, what his whole party stands for, at least in Mexico City. So that's against biased media coverage, against the pre-party and what it stands for. And we are fighting for education, we are fighting for freedom of expression that doesn't exist in Mexico. Right now, Mexico is one of the most dangerous countries to practice journalism in. So, I mean, it's a whole plethora of...
But you haven't endorsed any of the candidates. Why not?
I'm sorry?
You haven't endorsed any of the candidates. You haven't endorsed López Obrador, for example. Why is that?
Well, because we don't think that there's a clear solution, that anyone is the leader of our own ideals. I mean, I think many of us lean left, but I don't think many of us really think López Obrador is going to save us all from whatever. I mean, many people think that it's time to give the PRD, PRD an opportunity, but it is not something that defines us all. Many of us are going to vote for a PAN, for example. Everyone has their reasons, but I think we're fighting for an ideal, we're fighting for the country we want to live in, and we don't see a clear-cut campaign from any of the candidates that promises us that.
So what are the tactics and goals moving forward? How do you link up with other social movements that we've seen growing in the past, like the Indignados or Have Cecilia's peace movement? And I mean, are you connecting with all these groups, and indeed workers' groups for that matter, and others who aren't doing very well economically? I mean, what's the vision?
Well, I think it's very difficult to state a vision, because this hasn't started with any kind of vision. We didn't know when we made the video that it would blow up the way it did. I think it's similar to the Indignados movement or the Occupy Wall Street movement, because it really has no faces. It's not like the Javier Cecilia movement, because he was a clear leader. It's a mass of students, a mass of young people that don't want a leader, don't want any one kind of thing. I mean, the basic thing that joins us is that we're not happy with the way the political class has been leading our country. So first we have to establish a common ground. There has been dozens of assemblies going on in Mexico City and in the whole country, and I think, well, that's what would make us closer to the Occupy Wall Street movement, the faceless aspect of it, and the Indignados movement, which is the angry side of it, the one that is not happy.
Right, Professor, I mean, give us a sense then of the significance of this new student movement then, both for the election, but moving forward perhaps, as people struggle to look at the deep problems of Mexican society and try and solve them.
It's very relevant because, first and foremost, it was unexpected. Even one of the founders says, you know, this was unexpected. For a country as politicized as Mexico, with a young and vibrant democracy for the last 12 years, free competition, not well presented, dominated by duopolies in media, just a huge telecoms giant, problems, but democracy being accepted. I think the system has ended up, and this idea of non-endorsement, I think, is crucial. It talks about a more general sense of malaise, a sense of, the system, the dice of the system are loaded, because it's not necessarily the good or bad will of this or that candidate. The system works to favor financially, politically, legally, those who are politically connected and or rich. A lot of the time those two go together, but not always. And so we are talking about, yes, a young, vibrant democracy, which nonetheless has become quite disenchanted about...
But given that, Eric Olson, then why didn't Andrés Manuel López Obrador, the candidate off the left, then not seize on this and become perhaps a bit more confident even in the debate on Sunday? Instead, he seemed quite happy just to sit back and not perhaps, use some of this kind of anti-establishment energy that's now beginning to appear. Wouldn't that have helped him? He doesn't seem to be. He seems reluctant to harness it.
Well, I think there's two different things, and he has to walk a very careful line. One of the beauties, one of the things that's captured the imagination of Mexico, of the student movement, has been its spontaneity and the fact that it doesn't endorse anybody.
Right.
It has an
but it doesn't mean a politician
authenticity.
can't exploit it.
Well, but he has to walk the fine line.
Or genuinely reflect some of the policies.
He has to walk the fine line. He can't appear to be manipulating it. He's benefiting more than Josefina or others because, as our friend Maria has said, most of them tend to be supportive of the left. But he can't appear to be somehow pulling the strings behind the stage. He has to just benefit and allow it to nurture. Now, you were asking about the debate. Some would say he missed an opportunity to be more aggressive in his questioning of Pena Nieto, not along the lines necessarily of endorsing the 132 movement, but really going after his record, and more so the record of the PRI. He has decided, it's his strategic decision, that he needs to brand himself as a moderate, less aggressive. He had a bad reputation, frankly, after the 2006 election, where he lost just barely, and then his movement took to the streets, kind of held hostage the center of Mexico City. He's kind of trying to move away from there, reassure people that he's not dangerous. Had he gone into the debate and aggressively attacked, it would have sort of confirmed the image of him.
Having said that, though, Professor, I mean, how dangerous to the establishment is he, though? I mean, there are some who argue that his firebrand reputation is a bit overblown. He was a PRI kind of party member.
Sure.
If his policies look dangerous, perhaps just because Mexican politics has moved so far to the right. I mean, all he's talking to perhaps about is an old school PRI, more statist, support for the poor and so forth, but nothing terribly Chavista or anything about it there. I mean,
the thing...
He is an establishment man, isn't he, or not?
Certainly, certainly. He's an establishment man. Someone who joins the PRI during high school or university years has a very specific profile, which is first and foremost, at least back then in those classic years of Mexican PRI rule, being pragmatic. You can shift, you can move around, you can try to build bridges, but first and foremost, you're a player. And what you want is power, more power. In this sense, I am someone who strongly supports the idea that Mexico is a country of great inequality, where social justice needs to be taken very seriously, where the rule of law, which does not exist at all, needs to be constructed. And for this, some of the left proposals are just right. I don't like the person because the person has changed teams already several times, because the person has a track record, 2006, of outbursts, of uncertainty. So the left is good, and the message and the policy package is sound, and is what Mexico needs. The leadership within the left has remained relatively fractious and dominated by charismatic leaders. López Obrador, in my view, the message is good. I do not trust the person at all because he was an old-style priista.
And presumably, Maria Jose Lopez, I mean, that feeds into that sense of distrust that you're describing.
Exactly. I mean, yes, he has been showing a lot of signs that he's unstable in his politics, and that he... Well, as I was saying earlier in another media outlet, we have been fighting Andrés Manuel and 132 movement for some of similar things, for example, impartial media coverage and many other things that make up our movement. But the difference is we want it for ourselves as citizens. We don't want any political positions. We don't want to move ourselves in the tainted political panorama that's been going on. We want it because we believe that it would make a better Mexico. He, in his case, wanted to become president to have power of many kinds of power.
All right. Maria, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you very much. It's fascinating. Maria Jose Lopez, thank you. Professor Francisco Gonzalez, thank you very much. Eric Olson, thank you too. And that's all from the team here in Washington, D.C. for now. Do tell us what stories you want us to cover. You can email us at the usual address. Another show tomorrow.